be more than human. Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Joseph Carroll. I write under the pen name J.R. Carroll. And as the thumbnail suggests, we are now at Skin Game. And I do consider Skin Game to be my favorite Dresden book, especially upon multiple rereads. I will say that I believe that Changes is the best book in the series, and one of the maybe the best fantasy book ever written. But Skin Game to me, there's just something about a heist book or a heist movie that I can never get enough of. I watch all the heist movies. This is akin to like the Italian Job. So if you haven't been following along, these are spoiler-filled reviews. We're 15 books in, so if for some reason you're here and you haven't read it, bounce out and come back once you finished it. And make sure you're subscribed so you know when I put up any of the Dresden content that I have. And let's get into it, guys. So Dresden is on the island, as he suggested. At the end of Cold Days is where he was going to stay at, and so he's been out on this island. I think we're in like 6 months or so past Cold Days, and Dresden's got something going on in his head, right? They call it the parasite, and so he can't really leave the island. The scene we we're kind of thrust into is Dresden parkouring down the halls of Demon Reach, and we get a pretty cool thing of him looking at some of the crystals and hearing some of the beings in there say stuff to him, and it's mostly like, oh, I'll give you whatever I want, let me out, or I'm gonna kill you, or I'm gonna eat you. But there is a very British gentleman who tells Dresden that he's like says something to Dresden, and Dresden's like, who are you? And he's like, I'm someone who needs to be here, now piss off. So that has been a big thing in the Dresden community of who is that guy. So many theories. A lot of people think it's Merlin, or who could it be? But so Mab rolls up and she's like, hey, I got a job for you. And she basically plays Dresden, being like, hey, I know that's in your head. I have Molly's the only cure. I'm not going to let Molly, basically, she's not going to let Molly help him until she helps, or until Dresden helps her. And so Dresden is like, kind of thrust into it. And it turns out the job is for Dresden to help Nicodemus. And what a kind of reunion that was between all of them. And and Dresden's like, this is gonna go bad, talking to Mab, and how could you make me work for him, and blah 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 blah. And so then she's like, I want you to fulfill our agreement, and basically after that agreement you can do whatever you want. So basically Dresden, she doesn't really say it, but she's like, do what you do, which is screw him over. So from there, Dresden starts, we start meeting members of the team, right? There's Binder's back, right? Binder. And then we have Asher, who is a one of the best fire wielders of any warlock in the world. And so, Dresden's like, well, I got to figure out who's going to be on my team. And of course, who does Dresden go? He needs eyes. He doesn't need another supernatural person. He needs, someone who he can trust. And so he brings in Murphy. And it is we actually find out that Nicodemus has been hiding, kind of. There's these goats that just randomly keep going missing from like their warehouse that they're all stationed at. And so people are trying to figure out what it is. And it turns out it's one of the forest people. If you've read or listened to Working for Bigfoot, you will know about river shoulders. Well, this is one of his people, though he hates river shoulders. Apparently, this is an evil Bigfoot. But this thing fucks Dresden up multiple occasions, just to prove that he can. And basically, he's the muscle of the group. Now we figure out what this is all about. This is all about a heist. What are we breaking into? What are we stealing? Well, we figured out that we're going to the underworld. And as soon as that happens, as soon as they're like, oh yeah, we're breaking in to a vault that leads to Hades' personal vault and collection, I'm like, oh my god, I'm here for this. I am huge history buff. I love Greek gods and all that stuff. So I was so pumped. I was so pumped for it. And then it is the only way to get into it is because places connect, right? With in the Never Never, it has to be kind of a same place, a good place for good place, but bad place for bad place. So they figured out they have to break into Johnny Marcone's personal vault. And so you're like, oh shit, this isn't gonna be good. This is not what you want. But we're just, I think they were like the night before they're supposed to go and do this. We find out that there's another member of the group, and say it with me, Goodman Gray. Honestly, he becomes one of my all-time favorite characters. We figure out that he is a shapeshifter, right? And he is supposed to double the guy who has access to Johnny Marcone's vault, because retina scanners and everything. And he is when Dresden first meets him, he's the only guy in the entire place that is just cool, calm, collected, not afraid. Like most people are like, oh, putting on a, oh, I'm tough, you better watch out for me, or some people are looking over their shoulders. Goodman does not care. So Dresden knows that this guy is a serious hitter, and the guy has kind of a southern drawl to him, and he's funny. He flirts with Murphy. Which is, it's always fun to see people mess around with Murphy and her comebacks and everything, because Murphy's just a badass like that. But so the night before we're all going out there, they sense, Asher senses that somebody's watching them. Turns out Butters was kind of like didn't know if Harry was going to the dark side or not, so he's spying on them, and everybody takes off after him. Binder sending his goons after Butters, and so Harry's running after him, but Harry's kind of protecting him in a way, like he'll act like he's trying to hit Butters and knocks away one of Binder's goons. But then we figure out they had actually called earlier in the book. They called Butters Batman, and we figure out why, because he's out there and he's got all these tools. He's using mind fog, and he's powering a skateboard to go 30 some miles an hour, and it takes Harry a minute, but then we realize he's using Bob, and Harry's like, well, that's really inside of Harry's head. He's like, well, that's cool that he can do all these things, but he's not meant to be out in the field. He's not meant to be out and about, because if someone grabs the skull, well, now they have possession of Bob, and there's nothing can be done. But Butters uses him to such a cool things that he does. He uses him to kind of like, he gets knocked off his board, but he uses him to kind of glide through the air, and uses him as a shield. And then Bob inhabits one of the giant lion outside of the stock marketplace, and starts just killing all of Bynard's goons. But Harry kind of finally gets with Butters and is like, "Run, Butters! We gotta get you to Michael's place." And of course, we get to Michael's place, and right before he, gets away, Nicodemus shows up and stops him, and you're like, "Oh, damn!" And one thing that Murphy had been showing throughout like 3 different occasions, you see that she has a rocket launcher. Well, and her thing was, well, I'm going to use this rocket launcher against the Janoskwa, or the Bigfoot guy, and I'm sure that will take him down. Is kind of how she puts it. But she actually points it at Nicodemus, and Nicodemus is like, well, this, I'm not afraid of that. And she goes, well, you're not afraid of this because you think it's a rocket launcher. And she pops open the back and pulls out the sword of faith, and so then they start battling, and she almost gets him, and she's gonna drop the death blow, and then of course he pulls the old, "Oh, take my coin, I give up, redeem me," and so she's like, damn it. But the Janoskwa has Harry by the head, and Nicodemus says, "Crush his skull." And so she goes to hit Nicodemus, but of course he's already, given himself up. So all the power goes out of the sword. He snaps the sword, and it shatters. And you're thinking, oh my God, what the hell? And then out of nowhere, he breaks Murphy's knee in half, and then busts her ribs open. He shoots her, but she has a bulletproof vest on, but she is all kinds of jacked up. And Michael walks out, and walks up to the edge of his fence and says, "If you let them go, I will come out on my own free will, and you can have me." And Nicodemus is like, "No tricks, no nothing." He's like, "Yeah." And then the rain, because there's raining is coming down, and it all stops. And then we get to see Uriel comes down and basically tells Michael's like, "You don't need to do this. You've given enough." And he's like, "I'm not the carpenter that set the standard." And he's like, this becomes one of the greatest scenes. I quote this scene so much. So he's like, Uriel puts his hand on his shoulder, and he's like, "Okay, Michael." And Michael had told Butters to run around to the back, and he comes running out and throws a package to Michael. And Michael pulls out Amaracus, and all of a sudden he can walk again, and kicks down the gate, and he's like, "In nomine Dei, Nicodemus, I have come to face you." And it was like, Nicodemus is like, "Oh shit," and then Nicodemus basically says, "All right, whatever, they'll live, you can have them," but then goes, Harry, I'll see you back at the warehouse. You have to fulfill your role. And I mean, just, oh my God. And then from here, we get a great scene, one of the best scenes in Dresden. I mean, this book is just so good. Dresden meets his daughter, and she's just talking, you haven't been around, and, he's kind of explaining to her, oh, Molly says you fight monsters, and then she asks him, she goes, do you want to be my daddy? And as a parent, you're just sitting there like, hits you right in the feels. And, Harry's choking up, and then he reads her a bedtime story. And so we we go back, he takes Michael with him, and as they're trying to break in, Tessa, Nicodemus's wife, tries to come in and ruin the party, of course. But they fight her off. They make their way in, and each person has, a special kind of ability. Asher is with fire. Harry's the winter knight, so he's got the, cold or ice. And there's two different. There was a, entry, like a doorway or whatnot that they have to go through with fire, and Asher gets them through that, which was pretty cool. There was like a fire salamander that was in there, and Nicodemus throws his sword and hits the thing on the nose, and she's able to get that open. And then Harry has to go through like this maze, these giant ice blocks that are sliding around and falling from the ceiling, and he kind of has to time it out. And we get our parkour again. And then after that, we finally make our way into the vault. And Nicodemus had actually told everybody right before they went in that he's looking for the Holy Grail, basically. And, he's like, we cannot allow that. And, Harry's like, we gotta figure out a way to kind of screw him over. But as they get in, they see these riches, just all these paintings and diamond. Like, I think he described, like, there's like waterfalls or fountains that are spewing out diamonds, and just the most lavish things that you could possibly imagine. And so, Harry takes Anna Valmont, who's the person that they got to crack the safe, if we remember her from 10 books ago. But Harry sits his staff up and has, like, it's illuminating, so they think they're just sitting over there. So we find the Holy Grail, the spear, that spear of destiny. Then we find the real Shroud of Turin, and then the sign that said, Jesus, King of the Jews. They're all laid out. But before Harry could touch it, time stops, and behind Harry, like, everyone stops, everyone's frozen. Behind Harry is Hades. And Hades basically puts his hand on his shoulder, and he said he's like surrounded by black fire, and then he's whisked away to basically like a lounge area, where Hades is sitting down and just sipping on wine, and gives Harry some wine, and Cerberus is sitting beside him. And we explain that what Cerberus actually means is Spot, is what his dog's name is. And we figure out that this has basically kind of been a ruse, like he's known the whole time. And these items are actually weapons. And you have to basically earn your way to get and use these weapons. So, he's like, good to meet you, Harry. We're very similar. And I loved the whole thing. And actually, there was another door that they actually had to get through before they got to the vault. And this was another big, kind of a big emotional scene where Nicodemus actually sacrificed Deidre, his daughter. And that plays into the next part where Harry kind of gathers up all the items except for the Holy Grail. And, you know, when Nicodemus comes to grab it, Harry starts kind of spitting the whole thing. Oh, how, you know, your daughter told me all about how your relationship was. And he kept picking at him. And then basically, you know, once Nicodemus got the cup, you know, everything turned. The Janasqua actually has a coin. So did Hannah Asher. So Hannah Asher turns on her. She has Lashiel's coin. So there's that banter back and forth. And then you have Nicodemus. And they're getting ready to slaughter Michael and Harry. And Goodman Gray walks in. And, you know, Goodman Gray's looking like, all right, he's ready to take out Harry. And then this is where we figure out that Harry had actually planted Goodman Gray. He'd actually talked with, he takes us back to where a couple days before, where he was talking with Kringle, and basically Kringle hired Goodman Gray for him. And Goodman Gray is a badass. He takes on basically a Bigfoot with the bear figures. I forget what his actual name was, but I guess it's like makes him like 20 foot tall, and he's like tearing him up, rips his eyes out, and it was just an epic battle. Everybody's hurt. They finally make their way out. Harry kills Asher, and then kills the Janasqua in the ice. In like he turns back on the cubes of ice, and he ends up splattering him. And then once we get out, we're all racing back because Michael and Harry know that Nicodemus is going for, you know, Michael and Harry's family at Michael's house. We get there and they kind of battle. They battle back and forth, but Nicodemus, gets the upper hand, and Harry's kind of laying on the ground, and he musters all his will and his strength, and he sees the hilt of the sword of faith. It's all, of course, there's no blade to it, but he's like, it's got to be able to do something, and he throws it, and it's a perfect. He talks about how it's a perfect throw, how everything comes together, and he's throwing it to Charity, and she lifts her hand up, and she tips it and misses it, but it lands in the open arms of Butters, and the sword basically turns into a lightsaber. Now, I know there's some people love this, some people hate this. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't think it's the greatest thing ever. I don't think it's a travesty. But yeah, he turns into a lightsaber, and he basically chases away Nicodemus. And this book just overall is my favorite book especially my favorite book to reread. It never gets old. And this is where we had our 5-year hiatus. Jim Butcher took a 5-year break for kind of, I believe it's personal reasons. Him and his wife were getting a divorce or something, but it was 5 years from Skin Game to Peace Talks. So let me know, where does Skin Game rank for you? Is it one of the best in your mind? Hit me down in the comments, and remember, be more than human.